Welcome and thank you for joining us for MEFA's webinar, Supporting Your Students in Making an Informed College Decision. My name is Julie Shields-Rutina, and I am the Director of College Planning, Education, and Training at MEFA. And we're so glad to have you join us. We are recording this session, so we will be sending that out to you tomorrow. And we have a terrific presenter today, Dr. Tim Poynton. And he is Associate Professor of Counseling and School Psychology in the College of Education and Human Development at UMass Boston. Let me just read you a little bit about his biography. So Tim Poynton's research interests are in the realm of issues affecting K through 12 students and the school counselors who serve them. Current research includes an examination of the post-secondary transition of graduating high school seniors, focusing on how in-school experiences and attitudes relate to post-secondary outcomes, with a focus on the transition from high school to college. He's also engaged in research examining instruments designed to measure the attitudes and beliefs of school counselors. Embedded in the above research projects are an interest in technology applications, particularly issues around the use of online surveys and methods for improving their efficacy and usability, and applications for school counselors to collect and analyze data. And he is also working on a new book, so I think you'll hear a little bit about that during today's presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Tim, but just know that if you have questions, please type them into the question answer section at the bottom, and we will make sure to get to those questions. And if you need closed captioning to see the words that we're speaking, you can also hit the live transcript button below. So with that, Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Julie, for that kind introduction. I greatly appreciate that. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with MEFA and you all. I know this is being recorded and other people will watch it at a later time, but right now we've just got 3 of you here. So with such a small group, feel free to, we can make this a little bit more interactive than me just talking at you. If you have questions as I'm talking, or points you want to raise or counterpoints that you'd like to raise as we're going through this, please feel free to interrupt me, so to speak. So I do greatly appreciate your being here, so thank you. What we're going to talk about here today is informed decision making. This started off, I did a similar presentation last year where we were thinking a little bit about, geez, what can we do to support students and families kind of in the midst of COVID. And I think it's safe to say that in many ways we're still in the midst of COVID, but we're also starting to maybe see a light at the end of the tunnel. As you know, probably better than I do, the pandemic has really changed the landscape of college admissions in many ways. So last year we were seeing college applications were sliding, FAFSA applications were sliding, particularly for low-income students. We've seen the number of applications at selective colleges go up, way up sometimes, and because those selective colleges didn't add more seats to their incoming class, that's led to correspondingly lower admission rates at these selective colleges. So more people chose to apply since test scores were optional. More people chose to apply to places like Harvard and Yale. And Harvard and Yale got to reject more people than they normally do as a result of that. So the policies are changing and will continue to change. But one thing I think is safe to say is that more colleges are now going to be, there was a growing trend moving towards the test optional movement or test blind or having test flexible policies and things like that at colleges. But now I think it's been accelerated by the pandemic, and I think colleges, not all, but many colleges that went test optional during the pandemic are probably not going to go back. So that brings us to kind of some of the things that have changed during COVID. Obviously, as we just talked about, the testing policies are different now as a result of COVID in many places. The ability to visit campus, you actually couldn't go visit campuses there for a while. Now I think the tours and things are coming back, but most colleges now also have really good virtual tours that people can do, right? things that are the same, and something we'll talk about here more in a little bit. So while a lot of emphasis on the testing, the fact is that at most colleges, SAT, ACT scores weren't the most important thing that admissions counselors looked at when making a decision on an application. It wasn't, and I'll provide you with some evidence here to back that up here in just a moment. So while that does make things different, it just means now counselors need to rely, admission counselors need to rely even more on high school transcripts as a way to evaluate applicants more than they have before. They didn't have the luxury in some ways of having test scores to supplement that. But the fact is that high school transcripts have always been more important on average than test scores to admissions counselors when they make decisions. Your prior academic achievements are the best predictor of your future academic achievements, more so than any kind of SAT or ACT test score. So here is, some of you may be familiar with the National Association for College Admissions Counseling, or NACAC. NACAC does a state of college admissions survey every year where they send out a survey to directors of admission at colleges all across the country to ask them lots of questions on lots of different things. The piece of that report that I'm focusing on here today is when they ask these admission directors to rate what they view as important when reviewing applications for admission. If you look on here, test scores come in at number 3, or number 4, actually. The first 3 things that admissions counselors consider as being more important when reviewing applicants for admissions are grades in all courses, grades in college prep courses, and strength of curriculum, right? Those top 3 things are all things that are evidenced on a student's high school transcript, right? When you go back and you look at the trends for the previous 10 years before that, it was a similar story. So while admission test scores have become less important on average as a result of the pandemic, the fact is that transcripts were always more important to them anyway at most colleges and universities. So, so in some ways it feels a lot different, and in some ways it's a lot like it has been for a while. So with the emphasis being on high school transcripts. So the focus of today's talk and what I like to focus on is how do we help students and families make informed decisions? And the fact is that sometimes visiting campus actually it can help you make an informed decision. It can also get in the way of you making an informed decision. When we were preparing for this presentation, Julie actually shared a fantastic story of her own experience that highlights this, of how a college visit can actually maybe color your perceptions of the college in ways that might be unhelpful. So Julie, do you mind sharing?
No, I will share that when I was applying to college many years ago, I went to visit a very well-respected college university in the Boston area. And the way it was set up, then the tour guide took us to lunch and took us into the dining hall and was sort of, telling us to go through the line and telling us what to do. And here you pick up your plate here and your glass here, and then you choose your meal. And she told us if we wanted a burger to grab the burger at that station, and then grab a piece of cheese off the deli station. And then she advised us to take a coffee mug and fill it with boiling hot water from that station. And when we got back to our table to eat, she then taught us to take the cheese, dip it in the hot water from the mug, and throw it onto our burger. And I just remember I was, that just didn't sound appetizing. It was sort of disgusting. And so, embarrassed to admit, I didn't apply to that college because that just kind of turned me off. And in retrospect, obviously that was not a reason that I shouldn't have let that affect what I did at all, but I did. And, I guess that's the thing about being young.
Yeah, no, so the tour left a bad taste in your mouth, so to speak.
Yes.
Oh, man, that's bad. Yeah, so no, but similarly, Rich, this isn't my story, but my colleague Rich Lepan also shared a story that he heard from a student in one of his classes who shared that they went to tour college again in the greater Boston area. It was kind of hilly and it was hot that day, and the tour guide seemed to take leading this tour as their opportunity to get in a good workout. as opposed to providing just a tour to prospective students and families. So this student was miserable by the time they got to the end of the tour. They, similar to Julie, had a very bad taste in their mouth at the end of it and decided not to apply there. Reflecting back on that experience now as part of Rich's college counseling class there at UMass Amherst, the student said, geez, that college was actually really good for me, but I didn't even apply because I had that experience. Not informed, a long way of saying these are both examples of how, certainly we recommend students to go visit campus, but visiting campus isn't the only thing related to informed decision making. We need to look at the objective facts and figures, so to speak, and we need to look at the emotional side of the decision-making process. And when you consider both the emotional side of decisions and the factual side of decisions, that's when you're in a position to really make a truly informed decision. So, great. So this, I don't have, some of you may have seen this before. This is again getting at what we're trying to accomplish here through this informed decision-making process. So this is from Gestalt psychology. It's called the figure ground phenomenon. Some of you look at this and you probably see that you see the tree that looks like a tree on the savannah somewhere, right? If you're focusing on the black part of the picture. If you're focusing on the white space that's there, you actually see over here on the left-hand side, there's an ape that's staring at a lion with some fish jumping out, right? So depending on kind of what your eyes are focusing on, you're going to see different pieces of the picture. And what we're trying to accomplish in informed decision making is to have people be able to see both sides of the picture. You see both the tree and the animals that are here in the picture, and that's what we're trying to accomplish in this informed decision making process, is to give people the tools and the resources to be able to see the whole picture, as opposed to the slightly biased picture, the one that you might get if you make your college decisions based only on your experience during a campus tour, for example. That's not seeing the whole picture. So what is this process? How do we help students and families make informed decisions? What my colleagues and I have been working on, so it's Rich LePan, who's at UMass Amherst. He just recently retired from there, but is professor emeritus from UMass Amherst. And then a colleague from the state of Florida, Amanda Sturck. We've been working on this workbook to help guide students and families through the college decision-making process. And we coined this term LEADS to try and describe the steps that people can take to make a truly informed college decision. So what that looks like and what LEAD stands for. Again, it's not, we coined the LEADS acronym, but I don't think that we're describing anything that is brand new or unfamiliar to any of you here. Just describing the steps in the college choice process begins with making a list of colleges, right? That's the L. So in that first phase, it's, there's more than 2,400 colleges here in the United States. How do we get that initial list down to a more manageable number so that we can then more fully explore those colleges that are on our initial list? With explore being the E part. And then of those colleges we explore, we learn more about them. We choose which colleges we're going to submit applications to. That's the A in the LEADS process, the apply part. And then obviously, you can only decide to attend one of the colleges that you've applied to. So that's what happens next. When you get your decisions back, you have to choose from among those places you were accepted to the one college that you're going to attend and commit to. And then after you've made that decision, you need to succeed, and this is the S, in your transition from high school into that college, and then hopefully into that college and through to graduation at that college is the ultimate goal. So that's the LEADS process kind of in a nutshell. What we're doing to leverage the LEADS process actually is embedding within that, and within each step of the LEADS process, we're really examining and using information that we can glean from the what we call the 6 keys of college fit. And these 6 kind of perspectives, if you will, 6 critical perspectives are the objective side, the more objective side of the decision-making side of things, and gives you kind of 6 pieces of evidence to kind of evaluate each college you're considering from each of these perspectives. So with the academic match, do they have the programs that you're interested in, you're looking for? The career match, is it going to help you reach your career goals? Financial match, the money side is of course critically important. The personal match, do you have some need to come home more often than others? That's going to limit your distance from home, for example. So that the personal match gets at those things. The student outcomes gets at things like graduation and retention rates that are important for sure, that describe how successful the college is in supporting their students. And then the student support kinds of programs and services that are there are also important, depending on what your individual needs are as a student and a family, perhaps. So we go through the 6 keys of college fits. We'll use some. We don't use all of them in every step, but we focus on some in each step of the LEADS process. So you might be wondering, like, geez, why did you guys decide to go through with coming up with something like the LEADS process? Like, why informed college decision making? Why is this important? This stems from some of the research that Rich and I did on college knowledge. We developed a measure of college knowledge called the CAKE, the College Admissions Knowledge Evaluation. We did that, about 3 or 4 years ago or so, and realized after collecting some data in schools right here in Massachusetts that the level of college knowledge that students have, generally speaking, is woefully inadequate. The average score on the CAKE was about a little over a 40, between a 40 and a 50, we'll say, without getting too far into the weeds on that. But generally speaking, we learned from that research project that students were making decisions about which college to attend, which college fit them, with relatively little factual knowledge. So one example of a question that I have here, and the CAKE instrument actually had 75 items on it. This is one of them, one of my favorites, if you will. It asks students to correctly identify what demonstrated interest is. So you all likely know that demonstrated interest is a factor that some colleges use in the admissions decision-making process that describes doing things like visiting campus, interacting by email with the admissions counselor, even sometimes clicking on links in the emails that the admissions offices send you. All those are ways of demonstrating interest, a student demonstrating that they're actually really truly interested in the college that they're applying to, and that when they're submitting their application to that college, if they demonstrate interest, they're not just a safety school that the student is unlikely to attend. So we had about a third of the students didn't know what demonstrated interest, or sorry, 2/3 of the students weren't able to correctly identify the correct answer from among these options. So it's a multiple choice test. A little bit more than a quarter of the students who took this were able to correctly identify what demonstrated interest was. That's troubling, frankly, because if you're applying to a college that uses demonstrated interest and you don't know what demonstrated interest is and you don't know that they're considering it, you're significantly disadvantaged in your application to that college. Like, that's just the fact, right? So again, I don't want to spend too much time on that. I've got 74 other questions that are just kind of like that I could talk just as much about. But actually, if you want to take the CAKE, the College Admissions Knowledge Evaluation, for yourself, we put up a website, collegesanity.com, that has the CAKE on it. If you'd like to go visit that website and experience that for yourself, feel free. It's actually an interactive version of the assessment that gives you not only your score, but it gives you the correct answers along the way. It's meant to be kind of a self-paced learning tool. So feel free to check that out. But as you also may know, one way to find out if a college uses demonstrated interest, well, the best way to actually, or another way to find out is to just ask an admissions counselor, do they consider demonstrated interest when they make admissions decisions? They'll tell you, but they're not going to advertise it. But for those colleges that participate in the Common Data Set Initiative, you can go to this section C7 of the Common Data Set Initiative and see what level of importance they give to level of applicant interest, which is demonstrated interest, when they review applications for admissions. And you see here, this is from UMass Amherst, publicly available information, right? You can find this if you just look for University of Massachusetts Amherst Common Data Set. If you type that into a Google search, it's going to bring you right to the page where you find this. Navigate to section C7 of that Common Data Set report. And you'll see here that UMass Amherst considers level of applicant interest at the same level as class rank, essay, and recommendation letters. So I actually have a story about this from a graduate student whose brother applied to UMass Amherst in the honors program. there. Commonwealth College, right? I believe that's what it's called. They applied to UMass Amherst, they applied to Tufts, and they applied to MIT. And this student got into MIT and got into Tufts, but did not get into the honors college at UMass Amherst. And they were baffled by that. Like, geez, how did I get into the college that I thought was going to be like my safety school, but I got into the one that was my reach school at MIT? Like, how can that happen? And it turns out that this student's sister, who was the grad student I knew, attended UMass Amherst as an undergraduate and a graduate student. Her brother, who was the applicant in this case, had visited her several times at the college, and he didn't feel like he needed to go do a tour or learn any more about it, because he learned a lot about it by visiting his sister. But the admissions office didn't know that he came and that he knew about UMass Amherst. So the admissions office didn't think that he demonstrated interest. So instead of offering him a place for admissions that they felt like he would just reject, they just didn't offer him that place to begin with, and save that space, if you will, for another student. So again, I didn't talk to an admissions counselor at UMass Amherst, so I don't know if that's what happened, but that's a very kind of logical explanation for that, and demonstrates how this concept of demonstrated interest can actually play out for folks in admissions. All right. So how do we do this? How do we promote informed? How can we promote people making an informed college decision? We can encourage students' families to be exploratory and planful by attending to the 6 keys of college fit while following that leads process. We can also help them be informed consumers, both students and families, by recognizing some of the common myths that they may have about college, and also recognizing, in my work, and I think that this is important for everybody to recognize, is that there are actually lots of really good colleges out there for people. I know sometimes students, families feel like a lot of pressure that they have to make the right choice or the best choice, and if they make the wrong choice, that it's going to be devastating to their future. I think the fact is there's actually lots of really good colleges out there, but at the same time, I do think that while it's like making a good choice among many choices, some choices are still better than others, but maybe it's one of those cases where none of them is a terrible choice, but there's lots of good choices to be made. That's kind of the approach that we take with this informed decision-making process. So the first step is developing a list. Primary task here is to identify a reasonable number of colleges to explore more deeply. We try not to get too much into specifying a specific number of colleges here, but I think the fact is a built-in kind of incentive for keeping the size of an initial list reasonable is that the more colleges that are on that initial list, the more work you got to do to learn about them. So what we're focusing on here in terms of the 6 keys of college fit are these notions of academic match. So do they have the desired degree and learning options available? The career match, do they have the majors of interest that are available to you or to the student family? And personal match, does it have things like the location aside, special mission like an HBCU or a religious affiliated college or something like that, are pieces of personal match. And essentially what we're doing at this point, and I have a picture here of the College Navigator search tool. You can use the College Navigator to filter and sort all of the colleges in the United States based on some of these parameters to give you a much smaller list of colleges to more fully explore. You'll notice that cost is not something that we're limiting our list by at this point, and that's because the fact is that cost is not easily estimated at this stage in the process, because as you likely know, some private colleges don't charge anybody their sticker price. So there's no way that I know of to filter colleges by net price, which would be a way to do that. So at this stage here, the primary task is to identify colleges to explore more deeply without missing any good alternatives. So sometimes if you hear students and families say something like, oh, I'm going to apply only to state schools, or I'm only considering state schools because they're always cheaper. The fact is that they're not always cheaper. Their sticker price is always cheaper. That is true. But the fact is, after scholarships and institutional scholarships that the colleges provide, private colleges can in fact be cheaper than public colleges. Can be, not always. So, but the sticker price is always less at public colleges, but public colleges also give less scholarship and financial aid money tend to, right? So let's not have students and families exclude possibly really good private schools from their list simply because they believe that that state schools are always going to be cheaper. Not always true. We can actually, in the next step, when we're exploring colleges, we can get a little bit more insight into the cost by looking at things like net price. So here in the explore part of the leads process, we're focusing a little bit more on now with the list of 8 to 12 or so colleges. Again, that might be a little bit more, that might be a little bit less, depending on the student and family that you have sitting in front of you. But now we're going to explore that initial list of colleges that we have more deeply to figure out which ones, we're going to essentially start narrowing our list a little bit further to figure out which ones we might want to actually submit applications to. We're going to look at the 6 keys college fit. We're going to look at the academic match. So now this is the point where we're looking at things like selectivity. What are our chances of admission? Test scores. This is where a tool like Naviance can come in really handy. But if you don't have a tool like Naviance, you can actually try get a pretty good estimate from things like the College Navigator or the College Board website, both freely available to people. College Scorecard also gives you some information about chances of admission and selectivity as well. The financial match key is now here. We're going to explore the cost more deeply by looking at things like the net price versus the sticker price and how similar or different is that. What's the average debt of graduates when they actually finish college? You'll find that information on the College Scorecard. The personal match key, we're going to be looking at things like, does the college have the kind of diversity that I'm looking for? Does it have the dorm, or the dorm places I could see myself living in? Things like that. And you can get information related to that key from College Navigator, from a college website, or a visit to the college itself. We're also going to look at this point at student outcomes, how well the college does in keeping freshmen. That's the retention rate, as well as how well they do at actually having students who start as freshmen finish and graduate on time in 4 years, or even in 6 years, which is another commonly reported metric that's used. We're going to also be looking at another student outcome again to compare colleges by, is the debt and salary information that we can get from the College Scorecard, which is helpful. Again, so the primary, what we're doing here with student support as well, do they have the kinds of supports on the campus that we feel like we need? What we're doing is we're gathering information on all of the colleges that we're considering so that we can compare and contrast them to each other. That's the goal here and what we're doing in this explore phase. So once we gather this information, we can then move into the apply phase. But here's some examples from the College Navigator of things like, so this is the retention rate. This is what it looks like in the College Navigator. So how supported and satisfied are freshmen? This is the retention rates for first-time students pursuing bachelor's degrees. These are first-time full-time students who started their studies in fall of 2017 and returned in fall of 2018. So you're looking at this and you're saying, geez, that data is kind of old. And that's true. So this is a good thing, a good piece of information to have in mind to compare colleges by, but it might also be something, if there's a college that you're interested in, it might be worth asking the admissions counselor if they have any updated retention rates or graduation rates, because that data is old too, to see if they put in place any programs or services to better support students and increase their retention rate. It's something admissions counselors, in my experience, are actually paying pretty close attention to, but not the kinds of things they're going to talk about unless you ask them about them. So I think a good informed consumer is going to look at this information and use that information to ask questions. We're not just going to turn this purely into a numbers game where we're only going to apply. We're going to apply to the college or attend the college that has the best retention rate or the best graduation rate. That's not what gathering this information is about. It's really just to give you information to consider, to ask additional questions and get additional information. So here's the graduation rates. Again, first-time, full-time students. What's the 4-year graduation rate? What's the 6-year graduation rate? And then they even had started reporting the 8-year graduation rate. I don't know about you, but most of the students that I'm familiar with plan on starting and finishing college full-time in 4 years. I don't know of any students who plan on starting college full-time and have a 6-year plan to begin with. But students not graduating on time is a significant problem. And the fact is that some colleges do better than others in graduating their students on time and providing the supports and resources that they need to have and succeed in on-time graduation. And this is something that when you're looking at a list of colleges, you're going to see some variability in it. So again, use this information to ask more questions of the college, not necessarily to exclude colleges from your list at this point, but to gather more information. Like if you're looking at one college that has a 75% graduation rate and another college that's a 45% graduation rate, that's worth learning more about why that is. And if the college that has a 45% graduation rate is a place that a student or family is really interested in, encourage them to learn more about that, to talk to the college, say, geez, this is so much lower than the other colleges I'm considering. Have you done anything new to try and address that problem? And I would say that that's going to be a way to help people make a much more informed decision. They'll have more information upon which to base that decision, instead of going into it without considering that kind of information at all. An example of the academic match. So how likely am I to have close interactions with professors is one of the questions that you can get answered. So in the College Navigator, it lists the student to faculty ratio right there up at the top of the page for each college. So here you'll see it's 15 to 1. You're going to find some variability in this, but actually not a ton of variability. There's actually a big difference between a college that has a 15 to 1 student faculty ratio and a 17 to 1 student faculty ratio. So it just describes kind of it's a shorthand to describing class sizes, with knowing that there's great variability in there. So another thing you could do to get a sense of this is actually go in and look at the course catalog and see what kinds of classes freshmen are taking. And are they mostly large lecture hall classes with 200, 300 students, or are they starting off in smaller classes that have 15, 20, 25, 30 students or something like that? Good information to have. Another piece of academic match that I think isn't used very often, that's also provided in the College Navigator, is this is the number of students that graduate with each major each year. So if you have a student who's looking at this university who wants to be a biochemistry major, and you look at this and you see, geez, there are only 4 people that graduated in biochemistry, and only 3 people that graduated with a major in radiation biology. Like, I think that raises a fair question, like how viable are those majors? How can the college afford to have those majors with so few students in them? I think that's a fair question to ask. On the other hand, when you look at the biology major that has 51 students, there's no questions about the long-term viability of that. It's a popular major, students are well supported in it, students succeed in it, right? No questions about that. But when the majors are smaller, I think it raises fair questions to ask of an admissions counselor or of a faculty member in the program that you're interested in, like how does the college maintain this? And there may be very good reasons for this. So for example, at this university, I suspect chemistry is not here as one of the majors listed, but biochemistry is a combination of biology and chemistry, in addition to some unique classes, but they have the resources to support very few students because there's not very few specialized classes. It's like an interdisciplinary major, for example. But ask the questions. I think it's worth asking the questions to get the answers, just to have more confidence that the major that you're interested in is actually going to be there. I have been at universities where they have closed majors, and closed programs. It happens. So it's not beyond the realm of possibility, and the information provided in the College Navigator can give you some insight into that. If you look up here, the Asian Studies major only had 1 student graduate. Geez, how does that happen? How is that major viable? All good questions to be asking and information for people to consider as they're exploring their options. All right. For diversity, this information is in the College Navigator. It's just describing the population of students at the undergraduate level, what's their age, what's their race, and what's their, are they living on campus? Or no, sorry, are they out of state, in-state students? What's the balance of that? Just good information to have if that's something that's important to the student or family. This is the financial side of these, and again, I'm not sure if you've seen this, but I present this example here because This is one of those private colleges where almost nobody pays the sticker price. So what this is saying here, this information, 97% of all of the first-time freshmen who attended this college, 97% got an average of a $17,626 scholarship. That's about a 44%. I forget it's about 44% tuition discount. Not seeing my math. There we go. Yes, it's 40. So the sticker price, so the actual price that students pay is on average 44% less than the sticker price that the college advertises in terms of tuition and fees. 44% less. So if you were going to try and identify colleges based on cost and you didn't know that students get nearly a 50% discount when they come to this college on average, then geez, you might be missing out on a really good opportunity, right? So so this information is there in the College Navigator. There are some colleges I've seen that offer like a 55% discount to 100% of their students. So there's not a single student who doesn't get a sizable scholarship. In this case, so you might be wondering, or the question I ask is, geez, like, it's not how do you get a scholarship at this institution, it's how do you not get a scholarship at this institution? And the answer is usually international students are the ones who are full pay students at some of these private colleges where they can afford to pay the full sticker price. And if they want to come from out of the country, they're often willing to do so. So I'm not saying that that's a good practice, but I'm just saying that's the reality I think that some colleges operate on. And by having some students pay full price, that means that other students get to pay less, right? So that money has to come from somewhere, so to speak. Also included in the College Navigator, and maybe a helpful starting point as well, is the net price. So obviously the net price is the tuition and fees minus any grants and scholarships that you receive. So this is a good metric. And the College Navigator actually breaks it down by income level in brackets from 30,000, 30 to 50,000 or so, 50 to 75, etc. And when you look at this first college, you'll see that there's a pretty straight line gradient from the lower income levels to the upper income levels. The more money that your family makes, the higher your tuition bill is essentially. This bottom college here, a different college, but I looked at the net price here again. You see most of the families that make less than $110,000 here are paying right around $28,000, $29,000. But families that make above $110,000 are paying on average $34,000. So this is an indication that this is an institution that definitely distributes aid in a more need-based way. But by knowing the family's income level, which bracket it fits into, can help students kind of at the application phase or the explore phase, actually, which is the phase we're at. So before they're submitting an application, they can get a better sense of what attending the college might actually cost them by using these net price estimates, or even better, obviously, as you know, the net price calculator, where each school needs to have one of these. As you know, I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but if you don't want to go through the trouble of filling out the net price calculator for lots of colleges, this gives you a shortcut to try and get an estimate of that by income level. And then using the net price calculator also factors in other things like SAT, ACT scores, GPA, etc., that the college might use when they're determining how much scholarship aid to give. So it is definitely worthwhile for those colleges that students are applying to go through or considering applying to go through the net price calculator. But you can get a ballpark figure from these net price estimates in the College Navigator. Right. College Scorecard, I'm assuming that you're familiar with, another helpful tool funded by your tax dollars, just like the College Navigator. This presents a lot of information in kind of a user-friendly, intuitive kind of way. They actually present information by specific majors, and we'll talk about things like the number of graduates. So this institution had 71 psychology graduates who owed about $27,000 in student loan debt, cumulative, at the end of their time in college. They break that down into monthly loan payment. They also talk about the actual average annual or the median earnings. The median salary was $37,400. So collecting this information for each college is good student outcome information for folks to have, both in terms of the debt and the salary, and you'll often find there is some variability in there between colleges, which is just good information to have as a backdrop to making an informed decision. In the apply phase, so now you've gathered all this kind of objective information, and now you've got to critique and prioritize that list of colleges that you've explored, so that you can figure out which specific colleges you're going to submit applications to. To me, in terms of the college decision-making process, to me, this is actually the most important phase in the process, because you can only choose to attend a college that you've applied to, right? At least this year, unless you want to transfer in later. So you want to make sure that students and families aren't missing good options and missing places to submit applications to that will be a great fit for them, because they have a misunderstanding or something like that. So to me, this is actually this is more important than deciding which college to attend from an informed decision-making perspective, because the risk is that you're actually missing some really good places for you to apply to. So the primary task here is to identify those colleges worth your time and money to submit an application to, and then of course prep applications that are going to highlight how you are a good fit for that college. The way we do that is by having folks look at the information that the objective information that they gathered, and then kind of subjectively rating it. So now we're starting to move more into the emotion side of the decision-making process here. I'm bringing those emotions kind of back in, and using some subjectivity that's inherent in this process, right? Again, as I said earlier, this isn't all about the idea here with informed decision making isn't to base the decision purely on numbers, but to have your decisions informed by those numbers, in addition to your feelings and emotions. So here's an example that we have. I pulled this out of the book just for illustrative purposes here. So this is just a student's ratings, 1 to 5, on a scale from 1 to 5, how they feel like each of the colleges that they're considering fits them on each of the 6 keys, right? So, and it's a subjective rating. So as you can see, it varies here. It's based on the information that they gathered, but it ends up being their kind of subjective rating. And we're combining this information, so their understanding of the 6 keys of college fit for each college, along with their chances of admission. So if you're in a school that has Naviance, this is going to be perhaps a little bit easier, but if you're not in a school that has Naviance, you can actually put together a chart like this from the College Navigator. So this blue band here is the middle 50% of students' ACT and SAT scores, and this dashed line is the student's actual tested score. So it's that combined with the grade point average and the selectivity of the college, the percent of students that were admitted of all those who applied, also available in the Navigator. Putting all of these 3 pieces together into a decision-making matrix actually helps you visualize which colleges are the best fit for you, where you also have a good chance of admission. That helps you then figure out which colleges are the ones that you should submit applications to. Ideally, you find colleges that you have a high chance of admission at, that you also have a good, a high or at least a moderate fit with. So ideally, high or moderate chance of admission. You may choose to apply to places where you have a low chance of admission, but a high fit. Probably need to exert more time and effort in those applications, for example, but this gives you a way to visualize what your options are. You'll notice I'm not using the terms like safety target reach here, because I think that safety target reach, using that terminology, takes too much power away from the student, and gives far too much power to the college, because the fact is, here in this college decision-making process, students are choosing where to apply, and they're essentially telling colleges, yes, I accept you, in addition to you accepting me, should you choose to do so. It's a two-way street, and I just feel like when we use the safety target reach terminology, that it takes away some of that power that students have in the decision-making process. Certainly, the colleges do have some power in this process, and they get to make decisions on who to accept and who not to accept. But students and families also have power in this process, and then they get to choose where to submit applications to and where to attend. So the last phase of the, or the second to last phase, but the last phase of the actual decision-making process here is is the decide phase, where the primary task is to find the college, one of the ones you've been accepted to, which one you should commit to and attend. You're going to reevaluate all 6 keys of college fit, but with a different perspective now, because chances of admission has been removed from as a factor, no longer an issue for you. You also have award letters now to more accurately estimate the costs of college. Like, finally, now you have a personalized, here's what your first year will cost you. So now, when we go into the decision-making process, instead of looking at things, so we're looking at fit, instead of looking at things by chances of admission, we're looking at how desirable the college is to you. And this is the really subjective part, where students and families, or students, need to own their decision. So if they want to go to a particular college because that college has Greek life and Greek life is important to them, that makes it very desirable to them, they need to own that part of the decision, right? And talk about why it's desirable to them. I think that's okay, particularly if it's a high fit college. Like, it's okay if the reasons why it's desirable may not be the reasons that your parents might agree with, or that your family might agree with, but they're still your reasons. And I would encourage students to own what those reasons are. Looking at things in this matrix, again, just provides, this 3x3 table provides a way for students and families to really visualize which colleges might be the best options for them, based on the objective information that informed their ratings of overall fit, in addition to the desirability, which is the subjective, kind of more emotion-based side of the decision-making process. So at the end of this process, this should help students and families really be able to explain the reasons why, and own the reasons why they decided to attend the college that they chose. And then the last step in the process, so now students have chosen a college to attend. The task here now in the succeed phase is to successfully integrate into college financially, socially, and academically. And essentially what we elaborate in the book to do this is to make plans to integrate into the academic environment, to integrate socially, and to integrate financially, so that you're resilient to a student and their family is resilient to the possible challenges that students might encounter on their road from high school to college. Right? So some of the myths that students have that are often not terribly helpful. This one I mentioned earlier. So the college I choose determines the next 4 years of my life. Like, I don't think that that's helpful, because the fact is that choosing to attend a college doesn't mean you need to graduate there. Of course, I hope that people made the right decision and that they feel like it's a college that will support them through to graduation. I'm not encouraging people to transfer, but the fact is that about 1/3 of all college students transfer. 1/3. 1 in 3. That's a lot, right? So I don't think it's helpful to think that you're stuck at a college when in fact you can transfer. Now, there are potentially negative consequences to transferring, like on-time graduation might be jeopardized if you decide to transfer. But if you're truly not happy, or you're not going to be able to reach your goals at the college you're attending, staying there for 3 or 4 years longer, just because you don't want to transfer, that's probably even more damaging to your future than maybe falling a semester behind, because of how credits transfer. So, unhelpful myth, in my opinion. Another one is, I have to decide on a major before I get to college. Like, the fact is that, yes, knowing what you want to study can be helpful, but it's okay if you're not sure. So again, this 1/3 of all students who have declared a major, 1/3 of them have changed it. So that doesn't include students who started college as undecided and then picked a major. This is 1 in 3 students who choose a major, formally declare a major, actually formally change their major. 1 in 3. In most majors, you do have a little bit of time to explore, but the fact is also that in some STEM majors, you have less time to explore. So again, something we know, I think if you're all school counselors, you've all taken a career class, and you probably learned from those career classes that effective career decision-making happens at the intersection of knowledge of yourself and knowledge of the world of work, right? And the fact is, most high school students have relatively little knowledge of themselves and relatively little knowledge of the world of work. So they're going to gather that information and get more informed as they take classes in college and explore majors and do internships and gain more experience. They'll be able to make a better career decision. And sometimes that decision is that they need to change majors. I think that should be expected. But if you do have students who know what major they want, certainly I think that's fantastic. But expecting everybody to know what major they want to consider, I don't think is helpful or theoretically accurate and possible for a lot of people. Another myth, there's only one college that's right for me, and I mentioned this one earlier. There's actually many good colleges to choose from. So it's a problem of making one good choice from among many good options, as opposed to making there's only one good option from the choices that are available. There's lots of good choices. So I think that's important to communicate to students and families. And finally, the biggest, say it's the biggest myth, but sometimes the students that maybe aren't applying to college, one of the reasons why they might not be doing so or might not be getting support at home from doing so is because they feel like maybe a college education isn't worth the money. And yes, there are lots of good jobs out there that don't require a college education. But the fact is, when you look at the data, people with a bachelor's degree earn about $1 million more across their lifetime than people with just a high school diploma. Now, I'm not a financial planner, don't claim to be or anything like that, but it seems to me that investing in a college education, even if it's an expensive one at $100,000, and getting back $1 million on that over the course of your working career, that seems to be, to me, a pretty good investment. But again, I'm not a financial planner, so I don't know. But the other thing I do know is that when the more education you have, the more options that you have. There are a lot of jobs out there that require that you have a bachelor's degree. They don't even necessarily say it needs to be in a specific major, but they just say jobs in sales, for example, business analysis and things like that require that you have a bachelor's degree, because having a bachelor's degree signifies to the employer that you know how to learn, and then they can teach you the job that they need you to do. Right? So it's valuable. Just having the degree, regardless of the major, is valuable in and of itself and gives you more options. Whereas if you only have a high school diploma, your options are going to be inherently limited because you won't qualify for all the jobs that require some form of post-secondary education. So, all right. I have talked a lot. I think we have a few minutes left for questions. Please feel free. Thank you for your time and attention. I greatly appreciate it. But questions, comments, feedback?
Thank you so much, Tim. And we'll just wait a minute. I know that that was just so much great information. And we have a number of attendees, participants still here with us. So we'll wait a moment in case you have a question that you'd like to type in. If not, you can see contact information there. Well, I don't know, Tim, you may have just done such a thorough job, which you did.
Huh. Great. Well, yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to contact me by email or Julie by email. Yeah, thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone, and have a great afternoon. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.